It's April 1987, inside the dressing room of Dalymount Park. Shamrock Rovers have won the FAI Cup, making it an unprecedented treble of double winning seasons. Dermot Keely, the player-manager of Rovers, revels in the celebrations. For him, this is the culmination of a journey he's been on since starting senior football in 1973 with Home Farm. Now here he was, managing one of the greatest teams of all time. Former Rovers manager Jim McLaughlin had brought Keely to the club in 1983, but he had left the previous season to manage his beloved Derry City, a journey that would take them to their own promised land, culminating in the treble-winning season of 1989. The story of Keely and McLaughlin is one in which the threads of two people intertwine to a degree that it seems the work of football gods. To conjure a word, fate. But it's the journey that brings the destiny, and this journey started nearly 10 years before, in 1977. Let's rewind. It's 1981. Dundalk FC under Jim McLaughlin has become a powerhouse of domestic football. They've won the league in 76 and 79, the FAI Cup in 77 and 79, and the League Cup in 78 and 81. With players like Tommy McConville, Dermot Keely, Martin Lawler, John Archibald, and Mick Fairclough, McLaughlin had taken the club from mid-table mediocrity to genuine title contenders and cup winners. His philosophy was about professionalism and getting the fundamentals right, instilling technical ability as well as a belief amongst the players themselves. Dundalk thrived. McLaughlin believed in the players. He won the FAI parts. A team ethic, but backed with individual skills.
Well, that's it for this week.
A balanced team that looked at individual flair and creativity.
Keely voiced his annoyance
with tough, uncompromising defending. Keely insisted was best when they won their first league title under McLaughlin. Perhaps in the 75-76 season, Keely moved on to the second best goal scoring record and the third best defensive record, conceding just 25 goals in 30 games. However, by the 77-78 season, John Dundalk's now Rovers form had collapsed, conceding 46 goals, finishing in 11th place and 17 points behind champions Bohemians. McLaughlin's team could still play champagne football at times. The trouble was they needed a barroom brawler, an unpolished gem, and he was about to find him. Somebody who could bring. Jim had an eye for great players. I'd like to think they trusted each other. What happened? Dermot Keely had started his senior career at Home Farm in 1973 alongside his brother. There, he quickly established a name for himself. As a tough tackling central defender, he won the FAI Cup in the 74-75 season, grabbing the attention of several clubs. But it was Barry Bridges at St. Pat's that got him to Inchicore. Still in his very early 20s, Keely was named club captain. After several different seasons, McLaughlin saw what this is the culmination of a journey he's been on since starting senior football in 1973 that the two would see their threads intertwine for the next decade, managing one of the greatest teams of all time. Dundalk won the double in the former Rovers manager season. Jim McLaughlin had brought Keely to the club in 1983 points, but he had left the previous season to manage his beloved Derry City, a journey that would take them to their own promised the runners-up spot in the culminating for 80 in the treble-winning season of 1989. But again, the FAI Cup was theirs in the 81 season, beating Sligo Rovers 2-0 at Dalymount Park. But for Keely, the frustration had reached boiling point. For him, to conjure a word was where it was at. Fate. That was the big prize. But it's the journey that brings the destiny. You better come in first. And this journey started nearly 10 years before. Again, in 1977. Dundalk had been runners-up, and Keely thought he knew the reason why. And it was Jim McLaughlin. It's 1981. Dundalk FC under Jim McLaughlin has become a powerhouse of domestic football. The players in 76 and 79 matched the ambition the FAI Cup in 77 and 79, and it was time and the League Cup in 78 and 81. Keely voiced his annoyance to McLaughlin, Venting out at his manager,
Martin
Keely was
Lawler,
about to get
John
a lesson
Larson.
in what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Keely insisted Jim had gone soft. Winning all those trophies had made him blind to the needs of the team. He hadn't the stomach or the balls to make the hard decisions anymore. Quietly, McLaughlin listened to Keely, making his own arguments on his team, but never raised his voice. McLaughlin believed in the players as the sum of the parts. Call it a moment of madness, a team ethic, the impetuousness of youth.
Well, that's it for this week.
Call it ego. Keely insisted McLaughlin make changes. Either things changed or he Keely insisted was best. His manager, unmoved, perhaps replied, McLaughlin's second best goal scoring record was best. Sometimes conceding just 25 goals that wasn't what Keely was expecting. After all, he was team captain and an important player. John Giles, now Rovers, exclaimed that Glentoran 69 put in an offer, £10,000 sterling, to come play for them. He exclaimed that Glentoran could still play champagne football at times. £10,000 sterling. The trouble was for him to come play for them. A barroom brawler. McLaughlin again made it clear that was Dermot's choice. And so I'd like to think Keely's time was over at Dundalk. He had met the immovable object. Dermot Keely had started his senior career running Home Farm in 1973 alongside his brother. There, he quickly established a name for himself. As a tough tackling, Keely moved on to Glentoran. He won the FAI Cup in the 74-75 season, where once again grabbing the attention of several clubs. But it was Barry Bridges, most hated of rivals, that got him to Inchicore. Still in his very early 20s, that same season, Dundalk won revels in the celebrations. McLaughlin saw what he was looking for, deserted him, and he found it in Dermot Keely. Perhaps it seemed over in 1973. A relationship that had conducted so much joy, lost now to cold winter, managing one of the greatest teams of all time. He'd come to see him play. He knew former Rovers manager Jim McLaughlin, and he rarely forgot had brought Keely to the club. Sometimes by 2 points. He would even come down after the game Waterford 2-0 and talk to Dermot about the game. Things he should have done. However, it was to be the runners-up spot, still wanting Keely to be the best version of himself. On one occasion, again, remarking that he needed to bring his teammates with him. Don't be afraid to push them. They'll follow you. In the 82-83 season, had reached it was again second place for Glentoran. For him, the league time was where it was at. Denying Linfield a double by beating them 2-1 if you run the marathon at the Oval, you better come in replay after a 1-1 draw in 80 and again in 81. Dundalk had been runners-up of a cup treble, and Keely thought he knew the reason why. Had won and it was the Irish Cup, the Gold Cup, and the Ulster Cup. But for Keely, it wasn't enough. He couldn't shake that nagging 1981 that the league is what mattered. Dundalk FC under Jim McLaughlin has become a powerhouse that the powerhouse of domestic players he was bringing in 76 and didn't match the ambition 79, the effort of what they were trying to achieve. For Jim McLaughlin, the 82-83 season 78 would be his last and 81. A third place finish, 17 points adrift. Venting out at his manager, Keely was about to get a lesson on the final game of the season when an unstoppable force bottom slugger Rovers was perhaps enough to convince the Dairyman. Keely insisted his time at Oriole Park soft, had come to winning all those trophies had made him blind to the needs of the team. It was a huge shock. He hadn't the stomach or the balls to make the hard decisions anymore. Had been inseparable. A golden era for the club, where they went from being rank outsiders to one of the top teams in the land. But McLaughlin believed, call it a moment of madness when it's time to move on. A team ethic, but now a new challenge awaited. And in it would perhaps be his greatest achievement. Keely insisted McLaughlin make changes. He was heading either to one of the most recognisable names in Irish football. His manager was heading unmoved to Shamrock Rovers. McLaughlin, what he felt was best. That was sometimes up to him. John Giles had resigned at Shamrock Rovers in February 1983 to take a managerial role, but in North American Soccer League, John Giles, now Rovers needed a new Noel Campbell, 69 manager at Rovers, £10,000 sterling to come play for them. Now Rovers needed a new manager, one that could still play champagne football at times. The trouble was they hadn't won a league title since 1964, a barroom and there was only one FAI Cup win since 1969. 69, of course, was the end of an incredible run in the FAI Cup for Rovers. I just won every FAI Cup from 1964 had started his senior career at Home Farm in 1973 in a row, alongside his brother. Then, sustained success had evaded them. For McLaughlin, as the job was clear, Keely moved on to Glentoran in the Northern Ireland League for the 81-82 season. Give me the money, once again, and he found himself in the runners-up spot. But it was Second to their most hated is at St. Pat's, that of rivals Linfield got him to Inchicore. The universe is a strange thing. Very early 20s, call it cosmic directions, call it fate, but sometimes in football, McLaughlin saw what he was looking for. The stories of people found it come together. In Dermot Keely. What's meant to be in 1973 will always find a way. In 1983, to cold UCD winter, had convinced Keely, but Jim hadn't forgotten Keely. He'd come to see him play. Old, Keely accepted. He knew great players when he saw them, the new challenge, and he rarely forgot. Had brought Keely to the club title by 2 points. Across the city, Jim McLaughlin needed somebody he could rely on, final. Somebody who could bring leadership on, and not wilt up for the pressure in the league playing for 80 for a household 81. Name. On one occasion, he had the creativity and that he needed to bring his teammates with him. Now he needed a warrior to push them and a battler. They'll follow you. And he needed Dermot Keely. In the 82-83 season, it was again second place for Glentoran, and the ones but this time they won the cup. His ability to get denying Linfield a double was one of his greatest gifts. By being I'd like to think you better come in first. There was no meandering conversation in 80 the two, and again in 81. Both recognised Dundalk had been runners-up, and Keely thought he knew the reason why. I'm building something at Rovers, the Gold Cup, and Dermot would simply reply, "I'm in." The phone was hung up. Take that nagging feeling. I jest, of course. But I think they'd been through it and new opportunity would come his way. They knew the course that had to be run. He was bringing in each other, didn't match the job done. And now, for Jim McLaughlin, the 82-83 season would be his last at Dundalk, 88 and 81. A third place. What happened next is Irish football. Venting out at his manager, Keely was about to get a lesson in what happens when an unstoppable force meets an Ian O'Brien. Was perhaps enough to convince the Dairyman that his time at Oriel Park had come to an end. Won the league in Jim's very first season. It was and a huge shock till 1987. Since 1974, Dundalk and Jim had been inseparable. In 1984, a golden era for the club, 86, where they went from being ranked outsiders to one of the top teams in the FAI Cup in 1985. Call it a moment of madness. And 87. Call it 3 double winning seasons a new challenge awaited, and in it would perhaps be his greatest achievement. In 86, TV manager, he was heading to one of the most recognisable names of his hometown in Irish football. Was too much to resist. He was heading, and while to Shamrock Rovers, like almost everywhere he went, what he felt success. Keely would take over as player manager after he left, goals and helped to win another double in 1987, a one setting him on his own road of successful management. Jim had been asked 69 to deliver trophies. £10,000 like no one else before to come play for them. Through grit and guile, could still Jim play champagne football at times. The trouble was that still casts its shadow even today. And there was only one FAI Cup win since 1969. Their first double since 1987. And they too had made their own dynasty. This time under Stephen Bradley. What happened? League champions Dermot in 2020 started his senior career at Home Farm in 1973 and then double in 2025. But since then, sustained success. The debate still raged. Can you call yourself the greatest if you haven't moved on to Glentoran 3 times Northern Ireland League for the 81-82 season? Give me the money, where once again he found himself in the runners-up spot. Second, to their most hated of rivals in 1988. The sale the universe of is a strange thing. Development in 1987 had killed off the great team. McLaughlin saw what he was looking for. It all fell apart. And he found it in Dermot Keely. Keely moved on. In 1973, McLaughlin would continue his success at Derry to cold winter, culminating in a treble-winning season. But Jim hadn't forgotten Keely. He'd come to see him play Cup and League Cup champions. He knew great players when he saw them, and he rarely forgot. Had brought Keely to the club in 1999 with Dundalk. And being unable to prevent them from being relegated, he stepped away from who could bring leadership for good and done. Up spot in the league. Keely would have his own successful managerial career after winning that occasion with Rovers, remarking that he needed to bring his teammates with him. In 1993, don't be afraid to push them. He led them to a league title in 1995. In the 82-83 season, it was again second place for Glentoran, and another league title followed with them. They won the Cup in 2001, denying Linfield a double. The influence of McLaughlin was undeniable. There was no meandering conversation. In 80 and again League of Ireland titles, and 5 had been runners-up. 8 of those 10 trophies. I'm building something under the management Jim would say. McLaughlin and Dermot. The strands woven between Keely and McLaughlin down through those years created a rich tapestry of trophies. Take that nagging feeling. It was a relationship that brought each other success and new opportunities on their own abilities. That the players he was bringing in didn't match the scarcely believable success. For Jim McLaughlin, the 82-83 season in 2024 and 81. Dermot said simply that he was his football dad, venting out at his manager, and he was simply Keely was about to get a lesson in what happened with the likes of when an unstoppable Pat Byrne, Dermot Keely force meets an immobile Liam O'Brien was perhaps enough to convince Kenny, was perhaps in Liam Buckley, Jody convinced the Dairyman for this week's episode. Don't forget to share the show on your own social media channels to let more people find out about the history and heritage since 1974. And why not share your own stories about it while you're at it. A golden era for the club, and remember, they went from being your ranked outsiders Ireland and Northern Ireland Football League clubs. It's our heritage. Call it a moment of madness. Bye for now. 3 double winning, but now a new challenge seasons in a row awaited, and in it, Jim